No, my favorite moment in this was about power. It was talking about the concept of power. Everybody just say power. Power. Come on, say power. Power. No, there's a lot of misnomers about power. People believe that it's like the money and the power or the position in power. But the truth is power is really about choice, about having the choice. And that's why I appreciate Verizon and when Georgia smiled, they're giving us a sense of power and allowing us to reclaim our power. Yes? Yes. Absolutely. Both of you believe that, huh? All about realizing that we have a sense of power. We're talking about the power to change, the power to choose, the power to love, and the power to be loved in a healthy way. That's what this is all about. That's the really exciting part about this conversation. And just know that if you like that last conversation, the next one is going to go to another level. Everybody say another level. Another level. All right, somebody said, I'm ready for that. Our next moderator is co-anchor of the CBS 2 News 21-time Emmy. Whoa, hold on. 21 time. How good do you have to be? How good do you have to be to win 21 Emmys? Listen, there's been times in my life I didn't have $21. 21-time Emmy Award-winning journalist. Oh, my goodness. This veteran newswoman has dedicated her career to community service, advocating for children, education, and victims of domestic violence. Please welcome the great, the amazing, the 21-time Emmy-winning Pat Harvey. Oh, boy.
Amazing is the way to describe that introduction. Jonathan, if I had the money, I would hire you to do that every time I was introduced. Good afternoon. It is so wonderful to be here with you this afternoon. And I'm here, I'm going to say it, I am big fans of Dr. Phil and his wife, Robin McGraw. And I can't think of a more, yes, a more important venue to talk about domestic violence, to educate. Trust me, I have heard so much inspiring and healing conversation just being in the green room, listening to some of the panelists that you're going to hear from in just a minute. We're going to talk about direct service providers, how they've evolved over the last several decades, how they're meeting the needs of the communities now, and their visions for the future. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists to you right now. Please welcome from the National Indigenous Women's Resource, Rebecca Balog, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Domestic Violence Hotline, Katie Ray Jones, and Chief Executive Officer of the Jenesse Center, Ms. Karen Earl. Welcome, ladies. Thank you. Well, I want to throw out just a general question. We've been talking about direct service providers, some of this backstage for a moment there. Things have changed over the years, and I think I'd like to open with what you've seen or how direct service providers have evolved, even over the last several decades. Okay, and we're going to start with you.
I think seeing the networking and allyship really helps develop direct services for our communities, breaking down the silos and having organizations work together, I think is one of the biggest things I've seen change in the last 14 years. And you have a lot to talk about, especially when we talk about Native American women, so I'm going to get back to you on that. Okay. But also like to hear what you have to say about this, Katie, running the domestic violence hotline. You've really changed over the years.
We have, and I think many of the individuals who are here in the audience, our live streaming, helped build the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We certainly didn't create ourselves. Started with the Violence Against Women Act in 1994, with then Senator Biden thinking about creating a national hotline, and he said, I didn't think anyone would actually call. I didn't know there would be a need. Huh. And last year we answered 3.5 million call, our 3.5 millionth call. So we are very, very busy, but we recognize that a telephonic service wasn't just what victims and survivors needed, friends and family needed. And we actually launched an online chat service in 2007 through Love is Respect, which was a platform for teens and young adults. And we found that there were many women in their 30s and their 40s reaching out to that service because it was a new way that they could access. They weren't in a place where they could pick up the phone and talk. Someone would be listening, or their husband took the phone when he left the house. They didn't have access, but a computer was something that was safe to do so that they could reach out for help. And then we launched texting services. That was our next thing. It was like, okay, now people have lots of phones, maybe not smartphones. How can they get information and help? So we really try to be creative and innovative, and we've relied on our sister organizations, such as the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, Institute in Domestic Violence in the African American Community, Casa de Esperanza, to help guide and shape our services to be culturally sensitive and relevant as well. And I think we've just learned it's not, we need to have lots of messages to get to people. It's not one message.
No.
And how can we be really smart about it?
And over. We can't hear them enough. Karen, you're going to hear a funny story. I'm going to say it's funny coming from Karen, simply because when we talk about the Jenesse Center over the years in South Los Angeles, it's the largest domestic violence intervention center in LA. I think you have like 2,500 men, women, and children. But you shared a little humorous story with me backstage, and you said, it used to be you'd come to a shelter and you'd see women in their robes and their house shoes, and you thought, okay, well, they're safe. That's fine, but it's very, very different.
Yeah, we really needed to change the conversation, change what it meant to go to a shelter. And we started to look at the census data, where the women calling from, the hotline, where they're calling from, and we noticed that where they're calling from, they're not graduating high school, no diplomas. How are they going to change their lives? So we just got radical, and it wasn't enough to remove them and provide a safe space for 30 days, remove them and put them and let them breathe. We really wanted to change the conversation, and we've really done that. Broke a lot of rules and not pay attention to what was done in other communities, really focus on what was needed in South Los Angeles, what the women needed, what the children needed, what the community needed, what the men needed. And I think we've been very successful in changing how domestic violence is discussed and in the outcomes.
Now, for everyone that isn't familiar with South Los Angeles, it is primarily African American, but also heavily Hispanic.
Yes.
So that particular population in itself presents challenges, and you're talking about immigration status. Some people are afraid to come forward and report, and at the same time, language barriers. So how are you able to incorporate all of those things together and make adjustments for the community?
I think what is important is to ignore the boundaries, ignore all of the things that would preclude somebody from being successful. We don't care about immigration status. We have people who speak the language. We have attorneys who help navigate that. Just anything that would preclude somebody from being successful, that's what we're about. We have an on-site licensed attorney, and we knew we needed to do it. I just thought it was the common sense thing to do. I was stunned to find out that we were one of the few domestic violence intervention programs that had an on-site attorney. But when we started looking at all of the intake forms and the challenges the women were facing, I think every sentence started with, how is she gonna do that if she doesn't have this help? How is she gonna get a job if she doesn't have a high school diploma? Every question needed an answer. And there was a time where people would just go to the shelter and they give you, what do you call those, tokens to go to all the different services. We knew our population. We could not have them stuck in referral circles. So we knew we needed to bring all of the services in-house. And I think when we're really serious about the long-term changes that are necessary, you just got to, that's what we wanted to do.
Well, I'm very happy. Yes. We're very glad that you were able to bring all those services together. And Rebecca, you also have some specific challenges.
Yeah.
Native American women are abused 2.5 times more than any other race.
That's right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I know exactly why that is, and I'm happy to share it. That sovereignty, jurisdiction. Can I tell a story?
Oh, of course.
Tell a story of
Yes.
a life of a survivor in Indian country. Woman's hitchhiking, we'll just say, gets picked up by someone, is sexually assaulted. She gets away. She goes to the tribal police. I've been sexually assaulted. I've been raped. Can you please help me? Can they help? That's the big question. So the tribal police apprehends the perpetrator. And then what happens? Does he go to jail? Does it get investigated? Because of jurisdiction issues, that perpetrator is set free.
That's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
How do you propose to change that? Can it be changed when you're talking about sovereignty issues?
Well, that's one of the great things when you had asked what are the greatest things you saw change in the last 30 to 40 years is the allyship. VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, was just reauthorized. Let me back up for a moment. In 1978, the Olafan and Suquamish tribe, there was a drunk driving case. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they took away all jurisdiction for everything on every Indian land. So that's what developed this issue. In this recent 2013 VAWA reauthorization, they restored jurisdiction to us only for domestic violence. But specifically, there's so many unique holes that has to fit into that it doesn't apply to every Indian woman. It doesn't apply to half of the tribes, and we also had to leave behind our Alaskan sisters. All of the 235, I believe, tribes in Alaska are not included in that jurisdictional protection. So it's like living in your home. Yes, thank you. Mentioned Alaska, right? Don't forget our Alaskan sisters. So it really creates some challenges when you're living in your home and you're around your colleagues and everyone's talking about protection and how to promote healing in our movement and end domestic violence.
Would you say because of that really prevents women from trying to get assistance?
Yeah, not every reservation has a program. So then you end up going to a mainstream program where they're not familiar with tribal law. So
and that presents another problem.
A whole nother problem. And just to take just one more moment, I don't want to speak for any of my sisters, but she does tell her story. There was a woman who went to work, and her perpetrator, she left her perpetrator, he went to her job and shot her and her coworker. And because of jurisdiction, there were multiple offices, the local police, the FBI, and as she tells in her story, they had to take out measuring tapes to figure out where the bullet landed, where it was shot from, to figure out who had jurisdiction. And if it wasn't an inch between where it all happened, he would have never been prosecuted. Tape measures.
That's amazing.
In America.
That tape measures in America, and the fact that we don't talk about it as much.
Yes.
And I'm going to put myself in that category. When we're talking about media, those are the kind of stories that we should be hearing more about to maybe help garner some support, because it's so needed.
That's why the ally piece is so important.
Yes. Thank you. You know, Katie, we were talking about how, let's just go back to 1994. One of the biggest stories ever, the O.J. Simpson, Nicole Brown Simpson case. We talked about it a lot. Let's move forward over the years. What have you seen in terms of changes, in terms of how people report, how much they do? Do they still call the domestic hotline?
Yeah, I think, for us, we've never seen our volume decrease. Every single year we see approximately 5% increase in calls, and we receive over 200,000 calls a year, so that's significant. I think we see statistics that domestic violence is declining, but I know many of the people in this room would say it doesn't feel like that in local programs, it doesn't feel like that at the hotline. Very, very busy. I think the conversation's changing a little bit in terms of the access to information that people do have. If I think back to O.J. Simpson, Nicole Brown, where I grew up, we didn't talk about domestic violence, never heard the words. I somehow knew that it was not okay, and when I remember seeing that on TV, I knew it was wrong. But there was a lot of conversations about, a lot of victim blaming. not really understanding what the issue was. And I think that as a movement, we were trying to mobilize and really create an opportunity to create conversation. I moved forward to Chris Brown, Rihanna. A lot of victim blaming. We never know what happened in the car. That's what people kept focusing on. The hotline, we were getting calls from young girls who were saying, you know, who's Rihanna gonna get better than Chris Brown? You know, like it was okay. Like we literally were becoming a line of Chris Brown's fans calling the hotline to garner support for him. I know, it was just like, really, like it was just one of those moments where I think it really felt like we are not making any progress. It was heartbreaking to hear the amount of victim blaming happening and young girls also coming forward in a time to tell us, you know, I've been pistol whipped by my boyfriend, a young girl who had to be resuscitated, who was 17. It was just really, really shocking. For our program, Love is Respect, it was developed as a prevention program. It became an intervention program overnight with Chris Brown, Rihanna. And now I move forward to today with Ray Rice and Jenesse Rice. And just the questions from media have felt very, very different. It's created a whole different conversation. I have been tremendously inspired by the amount of survivors who have lended their voice and just really communicated to America how complex domestic violence is, how it's not okay to blame someone. And I feel like what we've seen in the hotline just in the last 3 weeks are so many more. I mean, we had an 82% increase in call volume as a result of the video. A tremendous amount of women coming forward and saying, I don't want that to be me. I thought I was alone. Like, I thought this was only happening to me. And it feels like, gosh, we should be so much further than that. Like, we should be so much further than a woman still thinking she's living alone in this terror. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, the whole panel, but
no, you know,
but it's like the conversation. This is like, I always just feel that survivors have the best voice for a woman who's living in this to say,
to share their
you
story.
have the strength, there's resources, there's people who can help you, but everyone's situation is different. And I think to Karen's point, around how services have changed, I think we've really recognized how every woman is the expert of her life. She knows her abusive partner the best, and we respect that, and we want to give her options and choices so that she can be successful. And if we walk in and tell her as an advocate, this is what you have to do, we're not much different than her abuser at that point. So we really want to be able to respect her knowledge and her experience to help her be successful wherever she is at in the process of change.
And I imagine that's got to be the first step even to bring someone in, is that respect level, that matter of respect, and obviously non-judgment. I was going to bring this up later, but since we just segued into that segment, and by the way, for those of you who are raising teenagers, my heart goes out to you. Those of you who have done it successfully, congratulations. You just talked about Chris Brown and Rihanna. Karen, how do we reach our young people? You know, when we talk about domestic violence, one way to curb it or to help stop it is obviously try to prevent it before it happens. So then let's talk about our young people. What are you doing to bring attention or to focus on young people in South Los Angeles?
I think being a community-based organization where there was no rules, no expectations, the fact that Jenesse is getting ready to celebrate and recognize 35 years is just amazing, considering. And, you know, we talk about Chris Brown and Rihanna, and I kind of maybe, it might be a little controversial, but he was a kid, and we talk about saving the young boys or the Boys of Color initiative. Like, who is that intended for if it's not for somebody like a Chris Brown, whose mother was a victim of domestic violence, who's been to my shelter and cried? And one little boy, she pinpointed and says, that was Chris, you know, at his age, if I had had a place to go. Wow. So it's like, how do we balance all of that and understand that we have a responsibility to our community, not necessarily to the greater public or the media or whatever they think. And what we do is take each one of those uncomfortable lessons and say, what can we do? How do we change this conversation? We have youth conversations. We have conversations with kids at colleges. Morehouse, Spelman. We're getting ready to have one in Brown. That's what we're doing. So that, I call it the after and before. Jenesse has the shelter for after the violence, after the hotline calls when she's sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we have that opportunity to change her trajectory. But then the before is what we're able to do with these young people so that her kids never have to see the inside of a shelter, because we're changing how they understand relationships, change how they feel about themselves, and just letting them know that none of that mess that happened is their fault, and they have a clean slate, and they're fabulous.
You know, and we applaud you for that. She just gave some very important examples of actually going to what Morehouse and Spelman happen to be college campuses. And is that part of the solution here? We talk about how difficult it is in the Native American community for women to actually come and report and feel that they really have safety, and not only that, they have a solution, that something's going to change, something's going to happen. Right. What about community outreach? Is that also important to go out in the communities when they won't necessarily know about your service? How much of outreach is done on behalf of your organization and the hotline itself? How do you reach people?
Well, it's DVAM. Can we get an applause for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? So, you know, I'm glad you asked, because I have a prop.
Oh,
and,
great.
You know.
I didn't know that.
I have a prop. So Verizon, actually, we want to say big ups to Verizon again for Native communities. Native Love was created by the Indian Law Resource Center and National Indigenous Women's Resource Center in Buffalo Nickel. And it is 3 videos about the experiences of Indian people and Indian reservations. And this video really helps allies how to be a good ally, teaches about the experiences, and also we're doing a youth campaign. Oh. And we're starting at an Indian school, and we're ending at an Indian school launching for Teen Dating Awareness Month.
Oh, terrific.
So that prevention, thank you. That prevention piece and outreach is so important, because if your community, and I'm speaking to all communities here, if your community doesn't know what you're offering, they can't find you.
That's right.
And they can't get help, right? So be in your community. It's DVAM, get busy.
Like that. You have probably, I would say, in the past, certainly relied on people to call that hotline. I mean, we've heard that enough over the years, but how exactly are you reaching out to the community or to people themselves? Okay.
So it's been interesting because we haven't had to do any large public service announcements. There's been enough DV in the media that we find, unfortunately, there's been enough DV in the media that the hotline's number gets used very frequently as a national organization to connect people to resources. I think that's really shocking when I say 5% increase in call volume every year, and we've never done a PSA in at least 10 years. I mean, that's horrific. And we should all be outraged about the number of women and men who need help. We did launch in 2007 loveisrespect.org, which was geared towards teens and young adults with a healthy relationship message, because we were hearing from local programs what they were doing to communicate about prevention work and healthy programs. And we said, how could we create this program at a national level for young people to know what they should expect from someone else? That we wanted to get before they were in crisis. We really wanted to say, this is what you should be looking for in a healthy relationship: dignity, respect, equality, healthy communication. The list goes on. And we were fortunate or unfortunate, I'm not sure, to have, there's so much reality programming on some select networks who use our resource to tag on to programming where, unfortunately, in reality shows, we find most of them have some type of abusive relationship happening. They use Love is Respect, and we find a vast majority of young people who reach out when they see reality TV, they see a resource associated with it, and they connect. What's been really interesting, and I think encouraging, is the number of individuals who identify as possibly being the abusive partner and saying, I just saw that on TV, that guy took her phone and threw it against the wall. I've done that. I think I need help. I don't want to be that guy, which is a different conversation than what we've ever seen on our adult services platform. So I think that's really encouraging. We're seeing young men and young women reach out and say, I may need help here. And so that's a really good place, I think, for us to be in as a field.
So the hotline itself, someone calls in, you have a chat, you have the ability to do an on-chat with them. Then what happens next? What do people do once they have that conversation with you? Do you direct them to a center? Do they get referred? Is there the follow-up? That's what really grates it to me, especially when it comes to young people, where they can listen for a minute, if you're right in front of them or right in their face, and then it's the follow-up that's so very, very important, which I imagine as a direct service provider, that's something you all have looked at over the years too, in terms of making adjustments or changes.
So we're designed to be a short-term resource to a long-term solution. We really see ourselves being that immediate link. We do crisis intervention safety planning. Not every individual who calls us wants to go to a local program. We still offer that resource, because they may say, I don't want that right now. We say, well, tomorrow, down the road, 3 months from now, you may change your mind. I want to give you the information just so you have it in a safe place should you need it. So I was telling Karen backstage, and we've referred to Jenesse a lot. She knows. I mean, we refer to them a lot from the hotline. We typically direct connect. If someone wants to go to a local program, that requires the person calling us not have to hang up the phone and make another call. We could know that can be a challenge. They may not pick up that phone again. It's an opportunity when we have them on the line. So we'll directly connect them to the program. And then they continue the work. And if that means getting them into shelter or getting them into supportive services, that's what they do. If we have a woman who doesn't want to go into shelter, then we move into a longer-term safety planning process with the individual. So we might be talking about how are you going to stay safe in place right now? How are you going to stay physically safe, emotionally safe, where you're living right now?
So you talk them through that process.
Right, and we would create an individualized plan for that individual based on what their circumstances were and what they think their abuser may be likely to do or unlikely to do.
Well, Katie, thanks very much for that. So now, Karen, pick up the conversation. What happens when the woman or the man, right?
Absolutely.
What happens when they walk through the door at Jenesse Center and say, I just got off the phone with Katie from domestic
connected the client to our 24-hour hotline. And for us, what's important for anybody in crisis is that we do what we say we're going to do. If somebody calls at 10 a.m., we have a protocol. Somebody calls at midnight, protocol. That no matter what time of day, there is an answer and an opportunity for that person to change their lives. We have relationships with the police, with hospitals who know to connect us, and we have ways of getting clients to the shelter 24 hours a day. We have relationship. You talked about outreach. For us, it might be different for other communities, but we had to change what our outreach looked like. We need to have wonderful relationship with Department Children Family Services. Some shelters, they want a distance from them, but we know Department Children Family Service have a lot of our kids who are moms who lose their kids because of domestic violence. So we need the whoever case manager is at Department Children Family Service to say, I know about Jenesse, I've been there, you will be okay, so that mom doesn't lose her child or can get her children back. And once somebody gets in the shelter, I think you can change a life with a smile. We have tons of amazing programs, but it's a connection. And we always say that we cannot afford for the client to see contempt in the eyes of the employees. So there's just a special person. People have to do this work. And everybody gets a case manager. That doesn't go away. Everybody gets some sheets and food. And, you got all of that. But then you got a plan, a case plan, where she is deciding what she wants to do with the rest of her life. And that's where the staff and the consultants and the volunteers come in. And this is all a decision we make. We don't have the money to do all of this. We start with what we know is necessary and then throw out the feelers. This is what we have to have.
How much do you stay connected with people that come through your doors or to use your services? And I'm asking this question because so many times people will say, well, yeah, they went through the doors, they stayed with the program for a minute, and then they went right back to the same environment. As a direct service provider, are you able to, when I say follow up, let's say maybe 6 months, that even if you don't hear from them again, is that part of the program?
So for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, we're completely confidential and anonymous. So we don't have caller ID, we don't have anyone's name. When we transfer to a program such as Jenesse, we don't know. Like, we actually created a space in our hotline where advocates can, it's what we call our space for intentions, where they can send a note and say, I hope she got in, because we don't know. We have those calls where they call us in the midst of a violent interaction, and we can hear screaming and yelling, and they don't call the police. She's choosing to call the hotline. And we're saying, call 911, call 911, and the line may disconnect. So we don't know. It's actually one of the things I say I miss about shelter, because I did often know where, you know, the woman I was working with was going. Even if it was back to, you know, her partner, we could say, I'm always here for you. We don't have that at the hotline. It can be very, very difficult that our advocates don't know where they're going. And that's why I want you to respond to this too, but just to get to Karen's point, it really takes a really skilled and special individual to do advocacy in this work. I mean, I think just kudos to everyone in this room, because even I think we would say when we're hiring individuals, I mean, you're looking for someone who is compassionate, can show empathy, problem solve, be a critical thinker, because you have to be able to think very quickly. Patience, I mean, it really is a unique individual who can do this work and sustain it, because it's very, very hard.
Karen, do you find, and you can answer this as well, just the direct service provider itself, in terms of the help that you need, do you find those kind of people? Do you need more people? Do you find yourself at a crossroads sometimes saying, well, I could provide more services if I had more to give?
More to give?
Yeah, more, in fact, more people.
Oh, yeah.
That are of, so we're trying to discuss your needs, you know?
Yeah.
Because the need of direct service provider, I mean, it obviously, we seem to learn more about domestic violence. Again, we talk about it quite a bit, and then it goes away. Then it comes back again. So I'm just wondering on the part of your services and what you offer, if it's sustainable, or how you can have the kind of help that you need.
Oh, it's very, very, very difficult. We have amazing staff and amazing board members and volunteers, but it's like a decision. For example, our attorney and people who decide that this is the kind of work they're going to do. I was just teasing with her the other day. She could be at a law firm someplace on the 90th floor. She chooses to do this work. That is, we make heart connections with the people. It's a constant struggle. Finances, domestic violence is not something that people want to talk about. We are sometimes at festivals trying to give out flyers. Oh no, I don't need that. I need anybody. So it's like you have that level, and you have opportunities that I try to learn from, like the ALS challenge. How can we have something like that for domestic violence programs to get these things funded? So, and I find we have to change the language to let people know we're not talking about you. And we make sure we include men, we involve the community. We want them to know that the impact, all of us impacted. It's not a women's issue. And we used to have conversations like in the community of women with the pink hats, a conversation. No, we involve everybody and letting them know how children are impacted. But it's still difficult, and we need people and organizations and corporations like Verizon. Verizon is a corporation that we have a personal relationship with the employees. I can call them and discuss issues. That somebody needs to be on a roof sharing that information about their generosity and commitment to this issue.
And you'd probably get more people on board just by that alone.
Can I also add to that? Sure. Funding, of course, is all of our challenges, and we're chasing the money sometimes. With tribal programs, I want to kind of break the ice and put a heavy news here that all Indian people don't have casino money. We're not all rich. We don't all get $40,000 a month, which I moved into a new neighborhood, and that's what my neighbor asked me. Oh, you're Indian. Do you get your $40,000 a year? It's nice to meet you. No. So.
Yeah.
So funding.
Would you like to make a donation?
Right. So, you know, that funding is such a challenge, especially in Indian communities, when a tribal community has a very humble infrastructure. Programs close all the time.
Yes.
So then we have communities that run on advocates that have it in their heart. Like you said, it takes a special person. A program will close, and a Native woman will still be the only advocate in her community, using her personal cell phone.
Wow.
So I guess one of the things with funding that I want to mention is every tribe is in a state in this country. So that ally piece is really important. So if there's a mainstream organization, don't forget your culturally specific communities that also need your help that are closing while the other programs are staying open.
And do you find much, like in terms of schools, you had mentioned the Indian schools. Are they very receptive? When you go into the classrooms, are you able to do that?
In Indian school, sure, mostly. That's what is wonderful about the Native Love campaign. It's all for Indian youth, so they can feel their pride. The intergenerational trauma from the boarding school experience is something that's very woven into the identities. So yeah, there's been a lot of change over the last few years, and it's good change.
Well, that's good to hear.
The fact that we're all here able to do this together today.
It really is that ally piece, because I know we had staff from Love is Respect who went to Alaska recently, and Native youth were there, and they were hungry for information. And when they were finding out about texting for services, they were just like, I can text, like this is the best thing ever. Like I want to text, so this is great. So it's just, it's about creating those allies so they know that there's resources. But I mean, we've made a conscious decision as an organization to work with culturally specific organizations. We're trying right now to help the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center actually launch a Native Women's Hotline to be able to get those services, because we know, like, if someone calls us from a reservation, the jurisdictional laws are so complex, that's not information that they can even train us on, because it's so complex. We need someone who really understands it, and the best way to do that is to connect a Native woman to another Native woman.
Makes sense, makes sense. You know, you were talking about texting. It's just amazing to me right now that this is being streamed, okay? So people are able to get information that way. And that texting is so very important. And let's go back to our young people. That's what they do more than anything, right?
They do, and you know, that was something that we launched, and now as we see young people have access to smartphones, they'll engage in an online chat as well, just to their smartphone. So it's about creating that access, because they may not want to use their computer at home if they think their parents are watching it or looking at it. We've had young people they've chatted with us, and she's bringing in her other friend, and she's like, I'm contacting you for my friend, I want to bring her in too. I mean, it's just amazing how technology can create this conversation to help more people.
If I asked you, and that's probably difficult, what do you need more than anything? What help do you need the most?
Everybody knows the answer, yeah.
Okay.
One by one.
Money, right?
Yeah.
Of course. Funding.
I'd say we need jurisdiction, and we need our treaties to be honored, so we can have safety for all women in this country.
And I would definitely say, you know, funding is a tremendous issue, I think, because it always feels like we need more people. Last year, the hotline didn't answer 77,000 contacts for help. And I always say that's the part that, where it makes me really sad to come to work knowing that there's that many people who reach out and we can't help. And, you know, most of us are reliant on government funding at times, and I would love to be in that place where we're not relying on government funding. I think that would just be a huge change for us.
How would people even know, first of all, to donate, or that you really need it? Karen is already shaking her head.
Yeah, I think for us, we need relevant resources and ways to communicate what our needs are, and to communicate better what domestic violence really means, and that it's not, it's something, a conversation, a topic that we can all embrace. And I think once we do that, or I don't know if it'll ever happen, but we ought to try really hard, because that will change how people feel about contributing and supporting it. I think that's really important.
You know, as a direct service provider, do you ever get people that come in and tell you about something that's going on in a household that they know of? Has that ever happened?
Oh, yeah.
And how do you deal with that? You call the police yourselves, or you direct them to law enforcement?
We have a wonderful team, psychologists, case managers, lawyers, everything, that's how we stretch our resources, getting everybody in on decision making and a team-driven decision on what do we do. Every call gets equal weight.
All right, and I asked that question because so many times after an incident has happened, you hear people that talk about it and want to come forward and don't know exactly where to go and would feel much better about going to an organization first before calling law authorities. And we've been talking about social media and texting, and let's talk about that Twitter. That's a very important tool. In fact, we have a Twitter, a question that someone has reached out to. It says, as a domestic violence survivor, I want to help, but I have no idea how to go about volunteering or becoming an advocate. It is not advertised. Go back up.
Look for your local programs, domestic violence, volunteer training. That's the best way to get started.
So when you say look for your local program,
You can call the hotline,
Yes, you
actually.
can,
That's
and
another
find your
call
local
type that we
program.
get, is actually people in communities wanting to know who their local program is because they want to volunteer, donate, or become an advocate. So if anyone calls 1-800-799-SAFE, they can talk to an advocate and say, I want to know who my local program is. I'm interested in volunteering.
well, we've got to keep that domestic hotline going then, right? Because that's probably the easiest way, right, for people to get help. Karen, did you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, it's on our website, you know, and application, confidentiality rules, as much as we can provide to ensure that we are getting the correct person to do this work.
And just off the cuff, you can go to a search engine, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's probably one of the easiest ways. Most people do have computers nowadays, so just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, well, we would like to get our audience involved. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists, okay, we'll start over here to my left.
Hi, I'm Barbara from
Barbara.
Seattle. I've been doing this work 35 years, and I want to expand on something Katie said. We're all in this room because we think what we do is so important, and I'd like to end on a positive note. I was actually in the LA area when the O.J. Simpson trial happened, and my staff sat around the table when they said not guilty, and we wept. And if you take that and you take the NFL disaster right now, I think the hope in it is that the public demanded something happen. The outcry of the public was deafening. And the difference in those 20 years should keep all of us in this room going for another 20. You know, we got another opportunity to talk out loud. We got another opportunity to have television stations talk about it, moderators talk about it. I just think it's very glass half full. I think that that's a wonderful thing for us to go away today saying, we've got another opportunity, we've got another open window, and we just got to get the message out there and keep it going. It's a big change in 20 years.
All right, thank you so much, Barbara from Seattle. Okay, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists. I just want to ask a question and advice. There's many women around the world who are sitting, wherever they are sitting, who do exactly the things that and are worried about the things that we're talking about here today. The U.S., compared to women I work with in Somalia or in Togo or in Haiti, have obviously much more complex circumstances. And yet, with all the support that is potentially available in the U.S., we still have the challenges that we're discussing today. So there's a level of accountability amongst governments that we are, I think, us that work in the area need help to strengthen. And I'd just like to see if there is a way in which, as a global movement, the women in the US and the women around the world, we could actually work together to make governments accountable, and for us as UN women to be part of that so that we could be stronger advocates, knowing that your voices are there. Because yes, it's 20 years now, and we've moved, but we also have a lot of work to do. How can we strengthen the fact that we have technology, resolve, and everything that could strengthen us to make governments more accountable and help them to deliver on their promises, because I'm sure they would also like to do a better job.
That would certainly help you, Rebecca, in your... All right. I am so sorry to say that that's all we have time for. I apologize for that, only because we've had such an interesting conversation. So I want to thank our panelists once again, Rebecca, Balog, Katie R. Jones, and Karen Neal with Jenesse Center. And thank you very much.